Okay, everyone, we're going to commence in 30 seconds. So thank you for your patience.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Omar Rodriguez. I am part of the staff of the Energy Bureau of Puerto Rico Public Service Regulatory Board. It is 10:07 a.m., Thursday, April 24th, 2025, and we are starting this virtual technical conference in case number NEPR-MI-2022-0001 in reference to Energy Efficiency and Demand Response Transition Period Plan. We welcome the representatives of LUMA and their consultants. We welcome the representatives of CESA, the Independent Consumers Protection Office, or OIPC, and all the participants that are joining us today. We also want to welcome those utilizing our live YouTube channel. This virtual technical workshop is being recorded in audio and video formats through the Microsoft Teams platform and streamed live via our YouTube channel. A copy of the recording, video, and audio will be available on the Energy Bureau's website. This morning, we are joined by Associate Commissioners Lilian Mateo Santos, Ferdinand Ramon Soigard, Silvia Ugarte Araujo, and Antonio Torres Miranda. We are also joined by our lead consultant, Asa Hopkins. On October 23rd, 2024, the Energy Bureau issued a resolution and order through which the Energy Bureau ordered LUMA to file the first 3-year Energy Efficiency EE and Demand Response DR plan by July 15th, 2025. The Energy Bureau also extended the Transition Period Plan TPP to December 31st, 2025, and ordered LUMA to prepare and file a revised TPP and proposed Permanent Customer Battery Energy Sharing Program, or CBES program, by December 2nd, 2024, and a proposed Backup Emergency DR program to be implemented by June 2025, and subject to monthly reporting on January 15th, 2025. After certain procedural events, LUMA submitted on January 31st, 2025, a motion to submit Permanent Customer Battery Energy Sharing Program proposal in compliance with resolutions and order of October 23rd, 2024, and December 5th, 2024. This motion included details regarding a proposed Permanent Customer Battery Energy Sharing Program that would begin July 1st, 2025 and run for 3 years. On January 31st, 2025, LUMA presented a motion to submit revised Energy Efficiency and Demand Response Transition Period Plan and request for modification of deadlines relating to 3-year Energy Efficiency and DR Response Plan. This motion included a revised TPP intended to run through June 30th, 2026. The revised Transition Period Plan included the Permanent CBES program. On February 28, 2025, CESA filed a motion to request a procedural schedule for stakeholder participation and comment on the Permanent CBES program proposal. CESA requested that the Energy Bureau schedule a technical conference regarding LUMA's CBES program proposal and allow further opportunity for stakeholder participation. On April 3rd, 2025, the Energy Bureau issued a resolution and order through which it partially approved the CBES program and scheduled this virtual technical conference. An agenda was included with the April 3 resolution. This technical conference will be mainly conducted in English and will be recorded in audio and video with simultaneous interpretation in both English and Spanish. Any person may speak in either Spanish or English as he or she prefers. A copy of the recording of this technical conference will be made part of the administrative file of this case. The Energy Bureau's consultant will be leading this technical conference. We will now establish the instructions to be followed during the technical conference. 1. Before answering any question or addressing the Energy Bureau, all participants must identify themselves for the record by stating their full name and position in the company. 2. Please keep your microphone muted while not answering questions or addressing the Energy Bureau to avoid disturbances due to background noise. 3. Before addressing the Energy Bureau, please unmute your microphone and request the Energy Bureau's approval to speak. Any initial comments from the commissioners?
I don't have any.
Me neither.
No comments.
Let's begin this virtual technical conference and ask our consultant Asa Hopkins to take the lead.
Thanks, Omar. Is everybody hearing me all right? Can I just get a nod? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just, because you might hear from them as well, I'll just say that I'm joined here in the room by my colleagues, Kyle Schultz and Aaron Malone. You can see them in the conference room picture alongside me. So thanks everybody for coming to this technical conference. I hope we can pack a lot of content into this morning and the early afternoon, and get a lot of progress made in terms of answering questions, getting feedback and input from stakeholders, understanding where we stand on various programs, getting everybody on the same page about the calendaring and planning for the coming years. So I'll go ahead and share some slides to give us some structure for our conversation. So as you all have seen the agenda, but just a reminder, we'll do some welcome. We're in the middle of that now, an introductory. I'm going to go around the room in a minute and have us ask everybody to introduce themselves so we know which different folks are present here with us today. We'll talk about the permanent battery sharing program proposal. Luma will give a presentation. We'll have some discussion following that. Then we'll move on to the emergency backup generator demand response program and its status. If it's the right time for us to take lunch, then we'll take lunch then. Otherwise, we might shift lunch back to or earlier, depending on how things are going time-wise. We'll talk about the transition period plan, the program plan to Luma's proposed plan take us through summer 2026. And then a little bit about the process and such around the follow-up EE and DR plan that would run through 2028. So I think we should get going in part by having everybody say who's here. I can see a list of names, but not affiliations. So why don't we go through the organizations that I know are here and have folks from each of those organizations identify themselves, and then we'll see who else is here. So let's start with Luma. Can you unmute and tell us who all is here from Luma?
Good morning. For the record, I'm Laura Rosas. I'm a counsel for Luma, and there are several members of Luma's team that are going to introduce themselves. So we're going to be either providing the presentation or for support in this process. So,
Good morning. This is Juan Carlos Patiño from Luma. I am Director of Demand-Side Management Performance. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Wall. I'm the Vice President of Customer Programs here at Luma.
Franciela Siciliano, Director of Energy Transformation for Customer Energy Programs.
Good morning. Gustavo Bonet, VP Regulatory for Luma.
Anybody else from Luma?
Ricardo Melendez, Project Supervisor from Business Transformation.
Raúl Pérez, Technical Service Supervisor from Business Transformation.
From folks from OEPC.
Good morning, everyone. This is Attorney Pedro Vasquez on behalf of the ICPO. Oh, there is also Gerardo Cosme, our technical advisor.
Do mute when you're and then from CESA or affiliated organizations.
Hi, this is PJ Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of CESA, the Solar and Energy Storage Association, which is the local nonprofit industry association representing the solar and battery companies on the island. Thanks.
Morning to all. Javier Rua here with CESA, Chief Policy Officer.
And then perhaps those folks, I know there was someone spoke up in the pre here from one of the aggregator participating companies. Maybe anybody who's associated with playing that role could identify themselves.
Sure. This is Michael Harbis, Senior Manager of Government Affairs from Sonova, and I'm also joined by Alex and Zach from Sonova, who work on the grid services and retail market development team.
Good morning. This is Chip Silverman. I am on Sunrun's grid services and virtual power plant team.
And good morning. This is Kevin Joyce from Tesla. I lead our virtual power plant business.
Jordan Graham from Tesla. I work policy.
I see Jeff Wall. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Asa. I wanted to also take the chance to introduce some of our program administrators who are potential to testify today as well. So if it's all right, Asa, I will call them out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's start with Christopher Ramey.
Hi, Christopher Ramey, a Resource Innovations Manager.
Erica Tillotson.
Hi, everyone. Erica Tillotson with Scott Madden, Senior Consultant.
George Jang.
Hello, George Jang, Resource Innovations, Principal Consultant.
Go ahead, Todd, if you're there.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Todd Williams, I'm a director with Guidehouse.
Todd and Brenda Gaba.
Hey, everybody. This is Brenda Gaba from Resource Innovations. I'm the load flexibility lead here.
That's it. Thank you, Asa.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for calling out that class of participants. Are there other folks who are here who have not introduced themselves? I see Mr. Peckman, and there may be others.
Right. Carl Peckman, who's Keylogic. We've been doing some work for Fred. And with me is Bernie Neenan, also with Keylogic.
Great. Thanks. I see Shannon Anderson.
Yeah, good morning. Shannon Anderson. I'm the Distributed Power Plant Policy Director for Solar United Neighbors.
Let's hear who hasn't introduced themselves.
I can hop in really quickly. Hi, my name is Jennifer McKeown. I work for Analytics. We're a member of CISA, and we're a data intelligence company tracking the energy transition and demand response programs. And I'm joined here by my colleague as well, Madeline Turner, who's our senior policy analyst.
Anybody else? Great. Well, it's great to have such a large and diverse set of participants, different perspectives on today's work. I know it's certainly possible we put the CBS part first because it's possible that there are folks who really are primarily interested in that topic and not in the later ones. And so, if you have other things to do after we've exhausted your topics, you have no obligation to stick around. Reminder, when you do speak, to identify yourself. There's a lot of folks here. We're not going to recognize voices. And if you show up on Teams under somebody else's name sometimes, because that's the person who's logged in and you're on their microphone. So please do identify yourselves when you do speak. So we will begin talking through about the customer battery energy sharing program. And the first thing there is to get an updated presentation from Luma on that. So I will stop sharing my screen and hope that you have appropriate authority to share yours and give your presentation on this program. I think because we have a number of slides and topics to talk through after, I think it makes sense for folks who have questions to just hold them. So Luma can give the presentation, and then we'll make sure we get to everybody's questions or comments in the following discussion.
Morning, this is Laura Rosas, counsel for Luma. Luma has a presentation and would like to have access, that the Energy Bureau grant access to William Morales from Luma to present. Great, and I wanted to mention that the presentation is going to be given by Jeff Wall, who's the Vice President of Customer Programs, that's been introduced previously, and by Graciela Siciliano, who's the Director of Business Transformation. Luma does have other members of its team here to provide any support as needed, and they may reach out to other members of the team if there are any questions on any particular subjects that require it. So we can commence.
All right. Thank you, Laura. First of all, thank you to our regulators, Lillian, Ferdinand, Antonio, and Sylvia, as well as our stakeholders, YPC, CESA, all of the aggregators on here as well. Obviously, you all play an integral role in these programs, and we appreciate your feedback and comments and questions, and look forward to the conversation today. Primarily, our objective today will be to present on the progress, the implementation, as well as the plans for the transition period, including that of the customer battery energy sharing program. We will have the opportunity to sort of expand upon that as to what that looks like in terms of the 3-year plan in the latter half of today's presentation, as well as an opportunity to discuss some more immediate activities which can be considered during summer 2025. As you all know, Luma's role is that of the system operator of the transmission and distribution system. And under that circumstance, we'll be speaking to the implementation of these energy efficiency and demand response programs or initiatives as directed by and through Puerto Rico's public policy. To date, Luma has launched the very first energy efficiency and demand response programs on the island, approximately the mature ripe age of 15 months for our energy efficiency programs, slightly longer than that for demand response, serving over tens of thousands of customers, both directly and indirectly. We've exceeded over 30,000 megawatt hours of savings thus far, with over 9,000 enrolled customers in the CBES program, and having activated over 100 demand response events, both of which contribute to the long-term energy and sustainability targets set forth. So with that, thank you, William. We'll move into the meat of the presentation. So first and foremost, we want to revisit sort of the function and the form of what has been a truly successful pilot. There are people here on the call today, as well those who aren't, who were very foundational in the setup of this, as well as sort of the launch and continued execution of the pilot. This period, as I said, began roughly December 2023 when we dispatched our first test events, and has gone on pretty consistently and persistently since, both in terms of test events as well as emergency activations of the virtual power plant using batteries. The model which the system operator uses is really based around emergencies when power supply is limited, potentially leading to service disruption or significant threat to grid stability or reliability. We leverage today a third-party aggregator model, which allows customers to opt in to the program through that aggregator, as long as the aggregator is a certified, PREB-approved energy service company and LUMA qualified third-party aggregator. To date, we have 7 aggregators actively approved and enrolling customers in the CBES pilot. One unique aspect of the CBES pilot, especially for this resource class, is customer choice. Customers can opt out of events at any point in time. Customers may change the reserve battery level setting at any point in time, as well as altogether unenroll. The degrees of freedom are important to our customers here, as we understand that these batteries are both for their own personal resiliency and reliability, as well as when put together in aggregate, represent a resource that can often help with the resiliency and reliability of the whole grid for other customers. Oh, not yet. Back, please. The program today has approximately 9,800 customers. This exceeded our initial forecasted cap of 6,500 customers based upon active results collected on the amount of energy dispatched per customer, as well as increase in participation rates given the available budget as well as the energy needs. We believe that the need, if presented to our regulator as well as our constituents within the range of the budget provided, ultimately we want to maximize our energy outcomes of the pilot as well as the program. In this case, we've achieved really as high as about 20 megawatts of actual dispatched energy. To be clear, there are levels by which we think about this. There is nameplate capacity, there is available capacity, and then there is actual capacity. The metric that matters most for the system operator is the actual capacity. When called upon, what does that resource deliver? And this represents what we're getting from the pilot today. The program today has a 50 event minimum, but to be clear, over 119 events have been dispatched since the beginning of the pilot. We pay out on a performance basis of energy at $1.25 a kilowatt through to our aggregators, who all have unique agreements with their individually enrolled customers. I think it's worth noting that even though this is a pilot, as far as I'm aware, this is the second largest battery VPP in North America, as well as the most actively dispatched emergency battery program in North America. So all things to be proud of. Go ahead. What we want to talk about and call out for the discussion today is ultimately what changes moving forward into a more permanent program for the customer battery energy sharing initiative. Very little, in effect, has changed. Our goal here being to maintain continuity, both for customers as well as our aggregators and operators. And most of all, what we want to do is effectively enhance, whether that's enhancing participation targets or energy targets, or even sort of the execution as we get to larger and larger sums of energy, which ultimately the system operator needs to finally bring into the system balance as we call upon them. So you'll see that the primary changes between the pilot, thank you, Javier, between the pilot and the program are really these 4 that you see up left. This will be a 3-year term, and the reason that that's important is we've heard from customers, aggregators, even our system operator, that some amount of consistency and predictability is what enables the program to be successful. So being able to speak with a customer who is getting a solar plus storage system installed and explain to them how this program works, how long it will be around, it won't disappear tomorrow. These are things that are supported by this longer term time frame, which is proposed within the construct of the program for CBES. The number of customers, 19,500, was ultimately derived at looking at historical resource adequacy data. Approximately 90% of the events in the past, when there was a generation shortfall, fell into a range of about 40 megawatt shortfall. The CBEST program represents a way to help keep the lights on or reduce the amount of people who would be subject to manual load shed if that difference can't be made up. And so we wanted to solve for as many of those events as we could, barring some of the outlier events that existed in the data set. Using that 40 megawatt target, we worked backwards with the actual performance data of the pilot to arrive at a customer target of 19,500 customers that ultimately should be able to support that energy goal that we've set. The last unique part of the maturation of the pilot to program is that we are growing in the total sum of energy that we are looking to be able to dispatch on the grid. I like to use the example of a crawl, walk, run progression. And we got this program, set up very quickly with the help of our partners, using some more manual processes like email-based dispatch. What we found was that we've had great success with customers, like I said, upwards of almost 10,000 enrolled, but also that has brought additional sums of energy that have become more and more critical to effectively balance the system when we bring them online. As we exceed really the 20 megawatt threshold, our system operator has to consider how to balance the other assets on the system, and to be able to do so, we need to be able to mature our dispatch process, moving from a crawl process to a walk process, leveraging what is a pretty standard investment in a distributed energy resource management system. We'll talk more about DERMS forthcoming, but uniquely, this would be the enhancement required to support a larger sum of energy dispatch into the system as frequently and as often as we do, given unique system needs and capabilities. So for the timeline, as you can see, most everything here is sort of a standard expected period that you should be familiar with, but I will read through. Program year one for the program will effectively begin July 1st, 2025. To be clear, we are currently operating the pilot and dispatching. I believe we dispatched last night. I think we dispatched at least 3, if not 4 times this week, given the current generation scenario that we're facing. The CBEST permanent program total timeframe will exist over a 3-year period between fiscal years 26 all the way through fiscal 28. So that's July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2028. We will continue to provide quarterly review of our enrollment targets as well as budget. We use these to inform our forecast, which is given to the PPCA rider for the forthcoming assumed cost to support the program, as well as provide quarterly Energy Bureau reporting. Also for tonight, thank you, Javier. Fiscal year 25 Q4, ultimately we have a target to begin with the full integration of our DERM system. As I said, to be able to handle sort of the total capacity that we're starting to see from this program, which is both needed and required to operate successfully. So very quickly, I want to take a step through a DERMS for those on the call that are maybe less familiar with this technology, what it is, and perhaps what its benefits and sort of required needs are on the part of LUMA. So a DERMS, as you can see here, is ultimately a platform that aggregates and controls these resources at the edge, such as batteries, vehicles, smart thermostats, amongst other things. It can be used across rate classes, residential, commercial, and industrial. It's expected to perform these types of functions and more, but in particular, managing event dispatch communication to de-aggregators and participating customers. This reduces margin for error, especially as we increase the number of aggregators we have, as well as the number of customers, as well as allows the system operator to design a dispatch strategy that more uniquely meets the needs of the grid in terms of the generation shortfall unique to that specific time period, days and hours. It also provides the timeline and reporting of participation metrics and event performance. This is something that, again, we use a walk process for today. It would be a more immediate feedback loop that can be used by the system operator to enhance the dispatch of the forthcoming events. Last but not least, this is actually a part of a middleware that actually maps up into ADMS, which is forthcoming for Luma, as well as some of the other systems you see there, SCADA EMS. As we have more and more distributed energy resources on our grid, it is more and more integral that the system operator has a way to both interact with those devices, as well as take that data and performance into account when controlling and making other grid logic-based decisions and some of our other systems, such as an ADMS. To us and to the grid operator, a VPP or a DERMS is not really an either-or strategy. They are something that ultimately has to come together as we continue to pursue the growth of this program and these resources. So why do we need that? I think at left, you have the high level understanding of what these things are. We talked a little bit about the operational efficiency and real-time visibility. Those are really crucial pieces when we are kind of dealing with very little margin for error on the operator side. Ultimately, if you have that error, you will struggle with frequency and grid stability issues, and so it becomes even more integral to have this approach there. It allows us to better shape our demand response to meet the specific load needs, as well as create some consistency and modernization in our administration. As I said, as we continue to increase participants and use a third-party model for Luma in the middle, it ultimately brings a level of standardization to that process and automation to that process that allows us to gain efficiencies and reduce errors in the back and forth that we have in terms of performance reporting, invoicing, and as I said, sort of operational adjustment. The last part is that this is a foundational investment that goes beyond batteries. This is something, as you've seen earlier, that can lend itself to electric vehicles, can lend itself to other demand flexibility technologies. That's really the basis of sort of being the tip of the spear, as I call it, for our battery program. So with that, I won't read everything out right. I think what's important to note is that this is something that is effectively ready to be done. And something that Luma believes we need to pursue to continue to grow the program to the proposed 19,540 megawatt level that we put forth to PREB and our stakeholders. So the last part of the presentation is covering off on effectively what was proposed in that filing. This is for fiscal year 26. We maintain the same incentive level for consistency between the pilot and the program. At the time, we forecasted approximately 13,500 customers enrolled by the end of fiscal 26. I will say that trend line has shown itself to be increasing, as well as certain circumstances of our current summer generation shortfall have also produced an opportunity to discuss some other expansionary activities that may see this number go up. But those 13,500 customers would ultimately represent about 28 megawatts of energy. And there's been a forecast approximation of about 75 events in the next fiscal year, the majority of those being during the peak period, which generally lasts from May through October. So you would see in fiscal 26 those happening in July, August, September, October, and then probably a dip in the number of events or frequency of events, and then a pickup as we get back into April, May, and June of 2026. Altogether, what that represents from a forecast perspective is approximately $4.2 million in incentive payments and an admin budget of $1.1 million for a total fiscal 26 year budget of $5.3. To be clear, the incentive payments pass through directly to our aggregators after they submit their invoices for performance, and our aggregators pay the customers directly that they have enrolled. The admin budget is used for a variety of things, including Luma internal salaries, professional services, software and device cost, evaluation and reporting, education and marketing, outreach, and professional development. With that, I concludes Luma's presentation for the section on the customer battery energy sharing program proposal, and we'll leave it open to any questions.
Thanks. I think maybe what we should structure this is that if there's folks who have sort of specific clarifying questions on Luma's proposal or on the presentation that Jeff just gave, please ask them now. The follow-on slides that we have to sort of walk through some of the topics here cover a bunch of the same ground. So there's further opportunities that each of those we will be soliciting folks to weigh in on. But so rather than opining at this point, I think just maybe want to make sure we're all working with a common set of facts. So if there's folks who have clarifying questions for Jeff about the presentation, maybe ask those now, and then we'll share our deck and walk through those other pieces. I see Javier wrote of it.
Yeah, thank you. Quickly, why do we keep referring to the program as a proposal when the Bureau already issued a resolution accepting the proposal and making it permanent?
The Bureau blessed some portions of it. There are where the details of the budget or some of the back end pieces or other things are, the Bureau approved the sort of customer and aggregator sided facing of this. The whole thing hasn't yet been fully approved, so that's why I'm referring to it as a proposal. Chip Silverman?
Yeah, Chip Silverman from Sunrun. I'm sorry, I just need a little more clarification on that. What exactly, I read the order approving it, but I'm not understanding what is approved and what is not approved. Like, what is still up for discussion in the proposal?
So things like the timeline of process, things like the pace of program ramp up, the things like the DERMS and how costs might be allocated for that, things in the admin budget. Yeah, those are things that immediately come to mind. Test event planning, other things like that. Ms. Turner?
Yes, hi. I was wondering, what has been the greatest challenge on customer enrollment, if any? I know you guys have been hitting some really great numbers with this pilot, but I was curious what that has really looked like at the customer level.
Yeah, Jeff Wall, Luma Energy. That's a great question, Ms. Turner. I think, we have a pretty active and back and forth relationship with our aggregator partners here, and they really serve as the boots on the ground in terms of enrollment. Luma is very indirect in customer enrollment today, but what they voiced to us through our quarterly stakeholder sessions that we have, as well as many of them we meet with on a more frequent basis, is that customers are ultimately looking for long-term sort of predictability to sort of approach enrolling their battery asset in this program, right? The second part of that is sort of a unified voice. For the most part, Luma has a limited set of sort of outbound educational content. We have a website page and a few other things, but we haven't made a lot of noise about enrollment because that's not really actively our role. However, the value of the VPP is something that, our aggregators have expressed, working with them in unison to sort of make a more wholesome statement to the market about, so that people can feel good and sort of trust in the process behind the VPP. And those would be sort of the two main issues that, I think we're looking to improve upon moving from pilot to program.
Torres?
Yeah, my question is for the budget. Does the 1.1 million admin budget, does that include the DERMS implementation? And is it being implemented in 1 year, or is it a phased implementation for the DERMS?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Torres. So yes, it does include that. DERMS has a software cost as well as device costs associated with it. And in terms of the implementation timeline, it's something that we've been putting some pre-thought into in terms of what it would take to transition our active participants over, given that we've started to reach critical mass of dispatchable capacity. And it's something that would ultimately run on the order of 4 to 8 weeks in order to have happen. It's not a long-term integration or software investment required.
Okay, thank you.
If you stop sharing, I'll put our deck back up.
Stop sharing.
Okay. So just we have a handful of slides here just to walk through some aspects of what's the program and just to get if folks have comments on any of these particular pieces of it. So first on regulatory process and timelines, as Jeff laid out, a 3-year program. I think the filing actually had said a biannual review of enrollment and budget, and Jeff, you had said quarterly to line up with the PPCA. So I guess, Jeff, if you could clarify that quick, and then whether just solicit whether any of the other participants here have any feedback or thoughts or questions on the program review over the course of those 3 years, and what opportunities are for stakeholders to give feedback on the program as it proceeds.
Sure, Jeff Wall, Luma Energy. Recognizing the difference between biannual and quarterly. Ultimately, for Luma, we filed quarterly reports for the TPP where we talk about our demand response programs, and so ultimately we can provide sort of clarity both in terms of the participation targets as well as we use those as the basis for the calculation that we use in the PPCA rider. And so I don't think we're fundamentally opposed to keeping the quarterly cadence. It's something that ultimately has to be done anyways. And so the formality of providing that to PREB and others can come through the existing mechanisms we have where we can provide participation updates, especially given I think we may have, like I said, the opportunity to accelerate participation and sort of downstream impacts that would need to be considered in terms of costs associated with a faster participation rate.
Okay, thanks. So for other folks in our virtual room, do you have any comments or questions on these process pieces? Commissioner Torres.
Yeah, I have a question for the aggregators, since we have 4 of the 7. If they could tell us how their customers are satisfied or any input that they have from their customers on this program.
Great. Sunrun or Sonova or Tesla or any of the others want to share any thoughts on that?
Commissioner Torres, this is Michael Harbour from Sonova. So far, we haven't seen any significant negative feedback from the customers. It's been a steady growth, little by little. Obviously, now that the program seems to be more permanent, we're looking at integrating the installers, the Windmar, the Power Solars, who have a lot of marketing power behind them and are the first client-facing with the customers. I think one thing that Sonova's looking to improve, obviously, as always, for customer experience, which is our main focus, always the customer, is trying to get the once we receive payment from Luma, the on-bill credit we're providing as the incentive for our customers out a little bit faster, right? That's something we've heard from our particular Sonova customers that they'd like to see an improvement, but that's not necessarily a programmatic improvement versus a aggregator improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Zach Bogosian from Sonova, I'd add a couple things to what Michael said. Customers really seem to appreciate just the consumer controls that they have, whether it's opting out of the program, opting out of specific events, or having full control over the minimum state of charge. And so these are things that are in the proposal and just give customers the feeling of control, so that they can balance their individual experience and still contribute to the collective good. That's the intent of this program.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, Commissioner Torres, Chip Silverman from Sunrun. Nice to see you. Thanks for the question. We have not received any overtly negative feedback about the program either, aside from the lack of kind of a vision for what the future of it is going to be. But I think the recent approval of the 3-year program timeline really gives customers and Sunrun a lot of security in knowing that it will be around, and provides customers the incentive to stay enrolled for longer. So ultimately, that's a good thing. One thing that I think we do hear from customers is just not everybody knows about the program, right? And part of that is like I said, customer education on the part of the installers, as Sonova was talking about. But there potentially is an opportunity there to do something more broadly, whether it comes from Luma, PREB, or another entity, to just make customers more aware that the program is out there, to dispel notions that this is somehow adversely affecting customers. It isn't, right? And so we want to make sure that all customers get that message in order to ultimately increase enrollment and increase the size and success of the program, as Jeff alluded to.
When is it that the customer is going to see the incentive?
Jeff Wall, Luma Energy. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Generally speaking, the process that's used today is that we run events on a quarterly basis, and at the end of the quarter, our aggregators provide us with a quarterly energy report for every enrolled customer in terms of the dispatch of that unique battery, right? They use the telemetry of that battery to provide the dispatch details, which are used around the performance that is ultimately compensated at that $1.25. Luma's net terms with the aggregators, I believe, is 30 days. I won't say that we always meet that, but we work our fastest to prioritize payment to aggregators, because in effect what we're doing is we're paying for power, right? They're offsetting power, or they're sort of a negawatt concept, if you will. And so that generally after the quarter should take anywhere between 30, on the long end, 60 days. Sometimes we have to go through iterations with our aggregators in terms of making sure that their invoices match their performance reporting. Another reason in support of some of the standardization and automation is going to be the word I choose today, of the DERMS process to lend itself there. And then between the aggregators and the customers, I can't comment how long that takes, but ultimately there is always a bit of a lag between the requested dispatch, submitted reports, the cutting of a check to the aggregators, and then the aggregators ultimately bringing that payment through to their customers. I do know that it is unique and different for each aggregator. Some aggregators wait until they're paid from Luma to pay customers. Other aggregators pay their customers in advance and wait on the payment from Luma. And even in other cases, right, this third-party aggregator market model says that if an aggregator wanted to say pay up front and give a customer an annualized credit and just say, hey, here's your $500, sign up for the year, and then ultimately the payment is really just terms between the aggregator and the customer. So there's a lot of different unique payment models used by aggregators, but that's just sort of a quick description of what that timeline typically looks like.
So the client should contact the aggregator to know how exactly that client's going to be paid then.
Commissioner Ugarte, this is Michael Harper from Sonova. So when we started the program, the payment guidelines and conditions were explained up front, so the customer knows when and how they will be paid. In the case of Sonova, it's going to be an on-bill credit they see eventually on the monthly payment, right? So for example, a Sonova customer pays a monthly $100 for a storage and solar system. Once we reconcile with Luma on those quarterly timelines, we on the customer's bill, they see a credit, right, against what would be their normal monthly payment. Other aggregators like Sunrun and Tesla have different models. I can't speak to how they're handling, but in terms of Sonova, when we enroll a customer in the VPP, the payment terms are outlined. I think Commissioner Ugarte, and being completely transparent as Sonova, it's something we want to get faster at. It's not that we haven't been complying with the terms with the customer, but it's something we are obviously pushing the envelope to be faster.
But when do they have a monthly invoice? Do you just, what do you arrange with the client?
Commissioner Ugarte, again, Michael Harper from Sonova. I think that's because that's not our model in Sonova, right? We have customers with loans or leases, not customers who have a fully paid system without a monthly payment. I think I don't know if any of the aggregators are on the call that use that model that could walk you through that.
I think Sunrun has some kind of a similar model that you can prepay and you don't have a monthly invoice. So what do you do then?
Commissioner, this is Chip Silverman from Sunrun. Our model is a little different than Sonova's. We pay customers via gift card twice a year, and we've gone ahead in cases where we have not reconciled with Luma in a timely fashion and just paid customers using our own balance sheet. With the understanding and our relationship with Luma, we assume that we are going to get paid. But so we forward the gift cards to the customers twice a year.
Because I think that if you more clients are going to go into this program, that would be your best market. Would be the same clients that will say about it that I received this incentive and such. So that's why I'm asking.
Commissioner, this is Chip Silverman from Sunrun again. Yes, it's a good question and a good line of thought here. We have gotten feedback from customers in Puerto Rico that these gift cards are very important to them and very meaningful, and that is their primary motivation for participating in this program. Right? We are talking, potentially hundreds up to thousands of dollars per year in payments from this, and that is extremely meaningful to some of our customers, and we get that feedback. I believe we shared it with Pred before, but I'd be happy to show you some of it as well if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Can I hear Tesla about their customer experience?
Absolutely. Hi, this is Kevin Joyce from Tesla. Our model is for customer payments is similar to Sunrun's in that we don't have a regular bill from the customer, and so we make payments to the customer. We do those quarterly to line up with the settlements with Luma under the program design. We do similar to Michael's comment from Sonova. We recognize that the timeliness and transparency of the payments has been a challenge early in the program, but we're pleased with the progress that the entire program has made in this regard. both through the administration of the settlement with the program, as well as the process that individual aggregators have with the customers to improve how that is communicated to the customer and ultimately shared with the customer from a value perspective. So it's definitely an area that we're focusing to improve that customer experience, because as the commissioner said, it's one of the best messages that we have to get the word out about the customer, which it would to get the word out to customers when a customer is pleased with the outcome of the program for them. And the word of mouth is probably the best tool that we have for growth.
The customer to stay in the program. That's another reason.
Well, and to stay in the program as well. I agree. And hopefully customers who have been frustrated early in the administration of the program will be able to have a new and fresh and more positive experience as we go into the summer season.
And I believe I heard from Jeff of Luma that the DERMS will help with this reconciliation of getting these invoices paid quicker. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's correct, Commissioner. Jeff Wall from Luma. Certainly the preciseness of the back and forth between us and the aggregators will be amended in using the DERMS, which will speed up our ability to process those payments administratively, making sure that the invoice and the performance of that specific resource line up. So that's certainly an upside to the DERMS as well from an administrative standpoint. I'll also say, because I know Commissioner Ugarte, you talked a little bit about unenrollment being a downside if I don't see a reward or incentive. Kudos to the aggregators we do have. Relatively, I think our average enrollment per week is something like 178 customers, and our unenrollment is often 0, 1, 2, 3. It's very minimal. And what we've seen the customer, I want to say we've had maybe less than 100 customers unenroll since the beginning of the program in total. So certainly on their part, managing that customer experience and expectation, it's hard to make it perfect for everybody, but really we far outweigh the unenrollment in terms of the positive sort of trend line you see from enrollment. So it's good news.
Yes, as long as you don't see a notice of load shed.
Well, the idea behind the VPP is specifically that. It's to help keep the lights on. That doesn't mean that the VPP can keep the lights on in all circumstances and scenarios. It is distinctly used for generation shortfall. If a tree falls, if a protection scheme fails, those are things that uniquely the VPP can't solve for and on behalf of the grid. However, what's I think, as pointed out by one of the aggregators, unique here is customer choice in terms of their reserve level settings and all of the other things that they have at their ability to change. So as their appetite for those situations like manual load shed might change, they can always remove their reserve level setting to something more comfortable. And we'll talk more about that moving forward too. And as far as the other end of the spectrum, Commissioner, would be I live in New York City 9 months out of the year, and I'm not in Puerto Rico in the summer, and I have 2 batteries sitting in the garage. And for me, this is a great way to give back as well as an economic opportunity. So I think it's really important that as the utility operator, we are not overly prescriptive. Rather, we bring that choice to the equation so that we can maximize the utility and the benefit for all participants.
Yeah, but as soon as you see a notice of load shed, I believe that a lot of clients will say, not this event. I won't participate because I want my power in my house at night.
Yeah.
So that would be a little bit hard to ask for a client. So.
It's a fair concern. However, I think we have over a year's worth of data where we've had both load shed as well as dispatch of the virtual power plant. And frankly, I think a lot of people that are participating are comfortable and aware of the fact of the situation that Puerto Rico uniquely has, as well as their ability to sort of manage and mitigate kind of their own risk profile to it. But totally fair perspective, and I think something that we're actively always gaining feedback on. And we're going to have to really wade into, especially this summer, as we consider sort of what the VPP is, what its efficacy is, and what the situational dynamics of generation are on the grid.
Okay, thank you.
Here. This is Attorney Vasquez for the ICPO. Do you have any statistics or any number of clients dropping out completely from the program?
Yes, we do have a number of clients that have unenrolled completely from the program. I believe I can get the specific number if needed in a follow-up, but ultimately, as I said, I believe it's under 100 clients against the denominator of nearly 10,000 enrolled. So it's marginally very small, and obviously I think the aggregators follow up with those customers uniquely. All sorts of different reasons why that might be, and probably not my place to speak specifically as to the reasons, but it's marginally a drop in the bucket so far.
Also, hearing about the different aggregators and the way to compensate clients, do clients are aware that they can like change from aggregator, or is there any type of limitation for them to just seek out another aggregator and seek a different compensation?
As far as I'm aware, there is no limitation that has been imposed by LUMA as the system operator in terms of the client's ability to pursue a relationship with any aggregator in the market. Obviously, the unique arrangement of certain companies with these customers, maybe they can speak more specifically of any sort of binding factors that may prevent that with their unique customers. But on the part of the system operator, as far as we've made aware to customers on our website and other places, no limitation in terms of who you can have aggregate you into the VPP, as long as they're an ESC as well as LUMA approved aggregator.
Yeah, my question was more addressed to the aggregators here in the conference. So if anyone can, please let me know if they agree upon or decline agree upon any limitation to move or drop out and move to another aggregator.
Again, Michael Harber from Sonova. Attorney, I think what's important here is the different types of financing models that are in the market. So for example, Sonova offers a loan, but also offers a lease. And under the lease, the system is a third-party ownership model, which Sonova is still the owner of the system. So obviously we retain certain control of enrolling that customer in that system in our particular aggregated system, right, or program. For cases that are loan customers, they have the option of enrolling with Sonova or enrolling with, for example, if you have a Tesla battery, you can enroll through the Tesla program. And for those customers that have fully paid down their system, I believe the door is open to choose which aggregator they would like to join.
So if I hear you correctly, basically the one that are in the clients that are lease, they do not have any opt out. Basically, they have to do it with Sonova.
Correct, but remember that in this program, this is voluntary opt-in, so we're not forcing anyone to be part of this program, right? We send them an invitation to the program. They have the choice to join or not, but yes, they have to use Sonova as the aggregator for this particular LUMA program.
Attorney, this is Chip Silverman from Sunrun. I just wanted to add and make sure that we're all on the same page about the benefits of the third-party ownership model. Sunrun also offers similar products, right? And the benefit here is that we're taking systems that could cost tens of thousands of dollars upfront, right? And we're providing them to customers for a low fixed monthly cost, right? So instead of having to spend all that money up front, you can receive the system for the low cost. And in exchange for that, as Michael said, right, Sunrun, in the case of our systems, retains certain ownership rights for the duration of the contract, including the ability to enroll it in a Sunrun virtual power plant. I also, Commissioner Ugarte, I had one clarification to the last conversation we had. And I just wanted to say that, for what we've seen in this program so far, which is over a year, right? Most customers are not contributing their entire battery capacity to this program, right? It is a fraction of that, and perhaps Luma could share some statistics if they have them as to what that is in general. But so even when there are load shed events, most customers are not left without any backup capacity, right? They set it high enough where they hopefully leave enough for them to ride through a 2 to 4 hour load shed event. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand that. It's probably if you have a battery and a lot of consumption at night, then you might be scared of that. Not because I'm worried that they might be in zero batteries. It's just for the feeling that you won't have enough power, so you will opt out. That's more my way of thinking. Not, but I know what you said. I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Jeff Wall, manager. I'm happy to share really what the aggregate looks like. Obviously, every customer has their own preference, and I think, Commissioner, your concerns are totally valid. That is something unique to aggregators' relationship with their customers and helping them understand what their typical usage is and maybe where that setting might sit best. But on average, we see sort of right around 40% of the battery capacity provided to the utility, with about 60% remaining in reserve on average. So that obviously has moved up and down since the beginning of the program, and everybody has a unique setting. Some people are giving 80%, but that is where the average sits across all of our aggregators today.
Thank you.
So this is Kevin Joyce from Tesla. On that point, we participate in a lot of virtual power plants around the world, and this is a particularly interesting dynamic that we're calling out here in terms of finding the right balance between resiliency and participation in the VPP. And I think it's something that everyone involved in this program, particularly the customers participating in this program, can be proud of in terms of being able to mobilize this capacity to help the community and to help the grid, even when there are very tangible trade-offs. And ultimately, I think it's going to be something that is going to be very positive coming out of this overall program, is that it's very much a community-minded kind of initiative. And I think it's something that customers can feel good about participating in.
Jeff Wall, Luma Energy. One last thing to add that I don't know if I called out clearly, but is worth reiterating around this topic, which is that Luma as the system operator will not dispatch the VPP if a particular warning or activation of storm is put out by the government. So if we have a hurricane warning or a hurricane advisory, those are events in which we will not call the VPP. Even if we have a generation shortfall, we will prioritize individuals' personal reliability and resiliency over the aggregate need. And so that's a really unique characteristic here that really we refrain from leveraging these batteries if we can foresee that we have a storm coming, a hurricane coming, any adverse weather events that ultimately we're going to want to prioritize the individual's resiliency over the grid resiliency, a day or two prior. So just wanted to make sure if you hadn't caught that in the presentation, that ultimately that's an understood fact about this program and the way the sort of standard operating procedure works.
I'm going to suggest that we work through a couple more of the next slides. I think we've covered some of the territory that might be covered by some of the next slides. I didn't, so we can, we'll work our way through. We the consultants had a handful of questions, topics we wanted to raise to hit the particular points. But I appreciate all of the back and forth and things that we're learning about how the customer relationships work. So I guess in terms of general feedback about the program proposal, I guess an open opportunity for aggregators or other stakeholders to share your thoughts about the program as it stands. Do you agree with the annual participation targets that LUMA has set out? Are they achievable? Are they too conservative? A follow-up question on that on a later slide too. But and anything else about the program design? It seemed like there was a strong interest in having the program stay relatively stable from the pilot into the program, and the customer and aggregator side facing pieces of this have changed little to none. But just opportunity if any of the stakeholders have questions or concerns about the program design aspects that we haven't already raised here. There's always there is a chance for written follow-up comments. So if there is anything that you want to share at that point on further consideration, very happy to hear. Mr. Silverman.
Yeah, Chip Silverman from Sunrun. I just want to say that we support a lot of aspects of this plan, and commend LUMA for putting this together. And really, I just want to reiterate, we also participate in VPPs across the country, and it is incredible how quickly LUMA stood this program up, how quickly it has shown to be successful, and where we can go from here. So I just want to reiterate that. I also want to just put on the record that in California, for example, which is our largest VPP, with multiples the number of participants of Puerto Rico, that program is operated without a DERMS platform, a simple email-based dispatch mechanism, which is what we're using in Puerto Rico right now. I'm not disputing anything that Jeff said about the value of the DERMS platform, but again, I just want to state that it is possible to do these, right? And the scale, again, like what we do in California, we can reach many, many more customers, right? And it's not a requirement of the DERMS platform in terms of Sunrun's perspective.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Torres. Based on that question, how many megawatts does the California VPP program have? Because I think Jeff's concern was that we're going from 20 to 40, and that's why they were talking about bringing the DERMS in.
Yep, Commissioner Chip Silverman from Sunrun again. I believe last year our peak capacity was in the 50 to 60 megawatt range. This year, I expect it to be, several multiples of that.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Jeff Waldman, Energy. Appreciate Chip's inclusion. I think it's worth noting that the scale of operation is much different in California than it is in Puerto Rico. California is also interconnected to imbalance markets. Ultimately, from a system operator's perspective, not an aggregator's perspective, in order to introduce this amount of energy, given the current situation we have with the balancing that is done by the system operator, respectfully, I think that the scale and sort of situational dynamics are uniquely different from that of California.
The next slide here, which is about marketing and customer participation. And we talked about this a little bit in terms of the customer perspective in the earlier conversation, but I guess one question we have is, there's 10,000 participants now. AMA trying to aim for 20,000 in 3 years from now. My understanding is that would still be a fraction of the total potential in terms of fraction of customers who could participate. I guess both wondering if you could provide a little bit more from both the aggregator and Luma's perspective on the ramp up and achievement of that target, and like what would, if we got in a situation where we're like, well, okay, we've got to 40 megawatts, why not 60 or 80? Right? Like, tell us a little bit about what that growth trajectory could look like. Why, you talked about 40 megawatts being a key level in terms of hitting 90% of the potential load shed events in the past. My understanding is that the load shed, you might want more this coming summer than in the past. Your thoughts about if someone could snap their fingers and we could have 80 megawatts this summer, right? Is that a good thing? Right? Seems like it could be, but just tell us a little bit about how we think about the total potential capacity and growth towards the rate of growth that we might be able to achieve.
Yeah, wonderful question, Lisa. Appreciate that, Jeff Wall, Luma Energy. You're doing a little bit of a foreshadowing to sort of the latter part of the deck where we plan to cover on the potential for expansion beyond sort of what was proposed at the time, January 31st. We weren't necessarily working with the current resource adequacy forecast that we have for this summer. So we will go more into that, but maybe starting out a little bit with, your first question about potential. I think what's really important to remember here is that, there is a large amount of installed capacity on the island in terms of battery energy storage systems that are eligible for this program, residential and commercial. From that, we really have to work backwards to derate, that total number, call it 2,000, I think was the number I had in there, 2,000 megawatts. Ultimately, of those customers, you have the sort of eligible population in terms of who the aggregators can reach out to. So who can you get a hold of? Who can you knock on the door? From there, they of course have the option to participate in as many events or as few events as they wish. They could participate in 75% of them, 50%, 25%. So that derates that value slightly. On average, we see about a 73% participation rate of our enrolled customer base. And then from there, they also have another derating factor, which is ultimately the reserve level setting. And so, like I said, I think on average it's about 40%. And if you do all that, right, it takes us down from 2,000 all the way down to really kind of sitting in this functional area of maybe 400 or 500 megawatts or less of achievable capacity for the program. And I think to your second question, if we could clap our hands and have 80 megawatts or 160 megawatts, especially given the scenario that is forthcoming this summer, the answer from the system operator is going to be yes, right? I think normally, had we not had sort of this situation befall us, we would take the same approach we had taken the first time, which is use a historical basis to inform sort of your plan moving forward. Given what we know to now be sort of the situation that we're faced with, certainly there is more willingness from the operator to say, well, what is readily available and on hand today that we could expand upon, even if it were temporarily, to be able to satisfy that generation shortfall need. So I think I answered your first question. Your second question is, yes, we would clap our hands and look to get more capacity from this if we could. Obviously, that comes with budget implications, et cetera. And then sort of lastly, is there the ability to do that? The answer is yes. We've been exploring that with our aggregator partners. We've been exploring that with our administrator partners. And ultimately, that's part of the presentation that we will either talk about later, or we could conceivably move up to sort of fit into the schedule right along line with the CBEST program, if that's to the commission's or the Bureau's preference. So.
I guess maybe I would be curious to hear from the aggregator perspective on it's promising that the target as published a couple months ago for FY25 was 8,500 participants, and they're past that already, and it's April, right? 13,500 by the middle of next summer, right? It seems like being able to potentially have resource on that scale sooner, right? Seems a good thing. If you're enrolling, you said 170 customers a week, right? That's 8,000 a year, right? Like that's a pretty good clip. So I'm curious what this sort of enrollment trajectory and potential looks like from the aggregator perspective, since I think that the aggregator said the folks who had the most customer engagement. And I was curious to hear from, I forget which of the folks who spoke up, talked about engaging with installer folks and the others who have had more direct customer engagement. What your thoughts are on potential for achieving larger amounts of capacity sooner.
Hi, this is Kevin Joyce with Tesla. I think some of the challenges in customer messaging about this program that we've discussed earlier are actually really rather important here. Those being one, just general awareness of the program. That's something that we need to continue to work on. The other challenge that we're starting to overcome here, which is wonderful, is the continuity and the stability of the program. And these things are related. And I bring it up because it kind of gets to some of the things that you've talked about in terms of how do we get installers involved. It's when this was a pilot without long-term certainty, it is harder to tell a story to a customer about how this will work for them in the long term, whether this is just a short-term opportunity or something that they should continue consider as part of their purchase decision. As we're starting to establish some of this certainty, it is becoming a lot easier to have installers and trusted advisors who are talking to the customers include this as part of how they discuss batteries with the customers, both having multi-year certainty that the program will be there so that they can count on this being part of their experience, but also more certainty as to how many people can enroll so that folks who choose to adopt this technology today can know that this program will be available to them by the time their installation is complete and all of that. So I think there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of untapped potential in terms of accelerating the growth of the overall program. Some of the limitations as far as how certain this program was going to be in the future were holding us back from getting to some of those, but some of the acceleration that you're seeing now that Jeff was mentioning that we're seeing in the enrollments is because of the good progress that we're making on providing stability for the program.
Thanks, Kevin. I wonder whether anybody else has thoughts along similar lines they'd love to hear about. Also, a follow-up sort of general question is, to what extent when we're seeing growth, it's growth in folks who are installing new batteries enrolling in the program, as opposed to, or how the balance is with the sort of installed stock of tens of thousands of systems that existed back. I mean, I know I see PJ's hand up, and you made points back quite a while ago about being able to there's a bunch of batteries sitting out there that we need to get them enrolled as a sort of untapped existing resource. So if you have any thoughts on from an enrollment standpoint, whether it's primarily a sales tool thing related to new battery installations, or to what extent we're really able to tap that pre-existing resource. PJ?
Yeah, I can comment on that because as CESA, our members include the aggregators and also the installers and the manufacturers. And so from what we're seeing, there's those two different universes of potential people that can participate in this, the ones that already have batteries today and the ones that want to buy batteries tomorrow. for both of them, it's going to help a lot that this program just converts from a pilot to a regular program. The sort of programs we're seeing elsewhere around the nation that are successful typically have longer terms, like 5 or 10-year terms. So just to go from a pilot to a 3-year term program seems like it'll help both universes of people. For the ones that already have batteries installed today, though, I think the latter part of this presentation, the CBS Plus, seems like it's probably right in the strike zone for what can be helpful with signing up a lot of the people that already have batteries today. And then for the new ones, for solar companies to get excited at the kitchen table when they're saying, okay, you're going to buy a system with solar and 1 battery. You might want to get a second battery if you're going to participate in this program. One thing that they need is to make sure there's no ceilings. Is that if they lean into it, there's already 4,000 customers a month signing up. So the greatest degree that they have that they're not going to sell something that the customer can't utilize. They need to know that that the program is not going to suddenly halt. Market predictability is what those companies are saying that would take for them. Well, again, primarily just switching from pilot to regular is going to have a big effect, I think. So as soon as we can get this thing 100% normal, will be the most substantial thing. And it looks like we're already headed in that direction, which we're thrilled about.
Yeah, hey, Zach Bogosian from Sonova. Would echo comments that Kevin and PJ both just noted. So I think really it's around awareness for consumers and confidence. I think awareness comes from getting this from pilot to a formal program and multiple stakeholders just speaking to the benefits and the customer safeguards that exist. In response to the question on new and existing, I think what we've observed in participating with other programs and has been well documented by folks studying VPPs is there's higher participation rates when you remove or streamline this consent, challenge, right? And so for a third-party, TPO lease systems, we're the advocate for the customer. We have authority to enroll, as has been previously discussed, but there's still sort of program consent required. You have higher conversion rate when you're getting that consent at the point of sale for new customers. And then for the existing customers, there's a fall off, as you might expect. And so you're subject to the success rates of omni-channel marketing, email marketing, SMS marketing, phone calls, et cetera, et cetera. The dealers can be helpful there because they've got existing relationships, the sales folks, and so those are things that we're deploying for the existing fleet. And that's the cohort that's really hard to ignore just because it's so sizable. But because you need to go back and get consent, you're really just subject to your ability to get in front of them. But awareness and confidence, extending the term, securing the budget, those are all things that help and then just creates awareness and gives folks reasons to say yes.
Yeah, Kevin Joyce from Tesla to underscore something that Zach mentioned there. When I mentioned getting local installers involved in the overall conversation, I didn't mean that to focus necessarily on the fact that new installs were an area of growth, although that is a component to it. It really does come down to awareness. And the best way to build awareness is through word of mouth and just the fact that people are talking about it and getting the people who are on the island, who are trusted advisors when it comes to these battery systems, to mobilize that group to be talking about it generally is probably the best way to build that word of mouth awareness among the existing customers as well. That's been a big part of our strategy, but it is the certainty that we're building is a big part of that overall strategy.
Appreciate everyone's comments, Kevin, Zach, others. I think one thing in terms of sort of the growth, right, and we're going to talk about it a little bit in terms of sort of what we may see as a more shorter term approach to the challenges we face this summer. The 5 and 10 year programs that exist elsewhere for batteries are often predicated on the idea that batteries aren't attached at the near 100% rate that they're attached here. And so the utility actually has to spend a little bit more upfront to actually get the battery installed, and then ultimately has a longer time horizon in which they're going to use it. I think, from LUMA's perspective, a 3-year time frame for now is really a healthy one, because we have so much happening on the system in terms of the investments, right? In terms of other storage, the ASAP program and things like that, that what we want to do is take sort of an incremental look at this program and have it continue to adapt and evolve throughout time. And I've spoken with our aggregator partners about this, right? What is an emergency program today? I think you'll always have some amount of VPP for emergency, but it will also continue to, spill off into some of these other capacity problems that you can solve for with ancillary services or locational based dispatch, some things that we're going to talk a little bit more in our demand response pilots section of today's conversation. I think the last thing worth noting about sort of the no caps or grow it as quickly as we can is that the program design as it is today has certain elements that would need to be functionally thought through as we consider to exceed that. Part of that is event minimums versus maximums. If we have 100,000 enrolled batteries and we have a 50 event minimum, that's obviously different economics for our rate base than is 20,000 customers and a 50 event minimum. And really the third part of this, which I think is sort of always out there, is that we are working with the national labs to ultimately look at our VPP, which, as I said, is one of the bigger ones, especially given the system size and sort of scale that we're working with here, unique characteristics, to make sure that we can understand what, if any, impacts there are that we need to consider on the infrastructure, the distribution system. That's something that's currently ongoing with the national labs. It's not something that's completed yet. And obviously our situation this summer is a little bit sooner than we all wish it was, but I think it's worth noting that, we have to look at all of those things as the utility, as the operator, and keep them all in balance. So fully support everything everyone said, just wanted to bring additional context to the conversation.
Thinking about the other stuff other questions we had about the proposal, but also where this conversation is going, I'm going to suggest actually that, Jeff, if you are amenable, that because it's so much part of the conversation, we might as well have the full picture. If you could actually at this point go through your sort of CBs this summer portion of your deck, just so we've all seen it, and then maybe we can have some follow up on that and come back to our other questions. I think it's going to feel weird if we don't do it now and come back to it later.
Hey, I was always kind of hoping we would go that way, so I'm happy to hear it.
You can go.
Why don't we need to get sharing again, and we'll present. We'll walk through sort of what is sort of the amended plan for summer. I think it's up. Thank you, William. I won't spend too much time on this. Jeff Wall, Luma Energy, but I did want to set the background context for those less familiar with the situation in front of us for this summer. In particular, our peak period in which the resource adequacy forecast was provided from May 1st to October 31st. There's significant potential for generation shortfall that might exceed 500 megawatts, given some outage of our base load generation that we normally account for. Even when we have all of our base load generation today, we still often run into generation shortfall events in the summer, which require the emergency dispatch of, right now, our only demand response mechanism to date, which is the VPP, the CBES program. In total, this forecast has shown approximately 90 generation shortfall events at a rather long length of event. If anything else happens, if we have a hurricane, if it's extra hot, if we lose another unit, obviously that further amends that number to be even higher. Given that, we were tasked by PREB to explore energy demand response programs that would be sort of quick start, quick activated, which includes backup generation, amongst other things. But obviously, we really leaned into the fact that we have an existing base of batteries out there, as well as a structural setup for CBES that might allow us to lean into that resource uniquely very quickly this summer. So we're going to talk through that right now, and we'll come back to the backup generation and cogeneration later on in the presentation. Okay, we talked a little bit about these numbers before, but why? There are 135,000 plus systems out there in terms of NEM customers who are eligible for this pilot today, soon to be program. There is 2,000 megawatts of storage capacity, but we talked a little bit through kind of what the derating of that looks like in terms of the current aspects of how this program is set up and designed with customer choice and optionality. And ultimately, I sort of hit on this in brevity in the last slide, but this is a really kind of sort of the lowest hanging fruit, if you will, going into the summer. There are some unique aspects that we're going to discuss in the forthcoming slide that are ultimately going to make it achievable. As we know, and we've spent some time talking about, enrollment is essentially the longest tentpole in the process, right? It involves, as Zach said, a lot of our aggregators individually out there pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, sending emails. And as we all know, customers are susceptible to ignore those things. And there are other ways that have been proven more effective to approach a problem like this in other jurisdictions. So you can go to the next slide, William. So the quick start strategy in conjunction with the aggregator partners that we have landed on ultimately is uniquely different from CBES as it is today. And I'll call this sort of CBES plus or a CBES expansion. And to be clear, the orientation here is a temporary one. It can be discussed if it were to be something that should be available on a longer term basis or on a reiterative basis. Say we get back to next summer and we're facing similar challenges. But for the sake of this conversation today, what we're proposing is uniquely from May through October, end of October of 2025, bridging the fiscal years. The unique difference between CBES that we would, respectfully ask OIPC and CESA and PREP to consider would be an auto-enroll strategy. And just to be clear, at Wright, what you have, it's a little much to read, but you have various sort of efficacy rates of enrollment best practices. This is actually from the DOE's Pathways to Commercial Liftoff Virtual Power Plants, which does include Puerto Rico's program. And uniquely, what you see, and aggregators are more than welcome to speak to their experiences personally, is that an opt-out design, and I'll continue to use these interchangeably, but to be clear, opt-out in this case is opt-out of participation as opposed to opting in, raising your hand to participate, or a more feasible term, given we have multiple levels of customer choice here, I will refer to as auto-enrollment design, has essentially a very little opt-out rate. So if you were to enroll 100 people, I think on average, the aggregators have shared with me their personal experience, you might see between 10% of those customers only say, you know what, I'm not interested. In fact, most customers don't notice. And really, when you bring it to their attention, as long as it's coupled with very clear off-ramps from that program, if this is not something you wish to continue to do, it's actually been pretty friction-free in other jurisdictions and maximizes the utility of the program design. So auto-enroll is the unique characteristic that I would like to visit here, because as we know, between the Sunovas and the Sunruns and other aggregators, we're capable, because clearly if somebody already owns their system and other arrangements, there has to be unique existing or agreement with that customer that allows the aggregator to do this. Sunrun, Sonova, I know for a fact on the call, have these with some of their customers, and they can speak to more specifics. But an initial assessment with them basically puts us somewhere in the range of, we would go from having 9,000 customers in the program today to 50 or 60,000 customers overnight, giving us somewhere in the range of 120 or 180 megawatts of dispatchable capacity. Certainly not enough to solve every single problem we're going to face this summer, but certainly enough to solve, some of those problems and reduce the total impacts that have been forecasted. I'd love to go from 90 to 0, but even if we could go from 90 forecasted events to 60, that's meaningful difference in keeping the lights on for businesses and residential customers who ultimately, as we know, depend on electricity for, more than just convenience. Oftentimes, it's needed for more dire circumstances. So as I talk about auto-enroll, and I know there will be questions here, I really want to reiterate that customer choice does not go away. As our utility aggregator partners auto-enroll customers, they will be presented, and I'll walk you through a process flow that will demonstrate kind of how that would look for our customer, and it will be unique between aggregator and aggregator, but there are principles that we will be aligned to. But in each case, the customer will be able to effectively unenroll and say, I do not wish to be a part of this program whatsoever, please remove me. They will be removed. If they are auto-enrolled and they don't notice, or they do notice, they still reserve the right to opt out of any event. If they say, you know what, Tuesdays aren't good for me, they don't have to participate on Tuesdays and they will not participate in the event. As well as the third option that they still have in the auto-enroll assessment would be to change their reserve level setting. Now, I'm going to pause for a minute on reserve level setting and talk a little bit about the law of large numbers. As you heard me describe, moving from 10,000 customers to 60,000 customers has real impactful results in the magnitude of the dispatchable capacity that we can use to reduce or remove manual load shed activities that have to happen. However, we understand that auto-enroll comes with a sense of sensitivity. And so using a relative marginal amount of that battery, say 10 or 20%, ultimately saves every customer who's auto-enrolled with sufficient battery should anything happen between that evening's event and the next morning, when we know that that battery will be recharged from energy which is derived from the solar panels which are on the roof or wherever they're located. And so using the law of large numbers, you require less individual commitment from a customer to solve a problem when you have an aggregate pool of resources where they're giving little bits, or the granito de arena, to ultimately help solve the problem. And using that law of large numbers also does a favor for the utility operator. When you have so much customer choice built into a program like demand response, oftentimes the system operator will feel less confident in the firmness of the resource. You'll hear this in other jurisdictions often. Puerto Rico does not have the luxury of firmness in the same way that other jurisdictions do. However, I will say, even with the 9,000 customers we have, we've seen a very predictable amount of participation and behavior that we constantly reference when we do get our performance data to be able to inform the expectation of the grid operator. As we bring that number of customers up through auto-enrollment with smaller amounts contributed, that further strengthens that same principle for the system operator, that the law of large numbers gives them a higher degree of confidence in what they will be ultimately able to dispatch to solve system problems. So just to be clear, this is not something that has never been done before. This is something that's actively being done in the DSGS program in California, as well as Connected Solutions in Massachusetts. And it would be the unique, I think, differentiator between what we have in CBEST today and what we would be requesting from sort of an expansionary period to go beyond the customer count, as well as change the dynamic of the enrollment process to be able to support a more quick start launch of this capacity relief drawn through the virtual power plan. Click through, William, just make sure I kind of hit my points here. I've already stated point number one would be a requirement that we would need some form of approval from. Point number two, we would have to get official approval on the use of the PPCA funding mechanism to also pay for this expanded summertime capacity from the CBEST Plus program. We, of course, as you get more customers and more capacity and more sensitivity introduced, would need to lean into a DERMS to be able to do this effectively, whether that's a straight line dispatch or that's unique load curve to fit the situation. Because it's a 5.5 hour event, not every battery will theoretically be dispatched for 5.5 hours, right? We may dispatch them in groups, or we may need to dispatch them in smaller quantities to solve a bigger problem at the front end of that period, as opposed to sort of a dwindling problem at the back end of that period. We will need to update materials and website, of course, and of course we would need the approval to begin with auto-enroll. I don't know if there's any other slides. Oh, this is a bit of a walkthrough of the process that we would use in effect to be able to support that. Once the aggregators, which by the way is optional to them, not every aggregator is going to be comfortable with that. They say, well, I don't want to go auto-enroll people, or I don't have the capability to auto-enroll them because I don't have those agreements. This is completely up to the market to use this methodology. Once we were aligned on that, we would align on our communications. Aggregators would reach out to customers using processes that they've already used in other jurisdictions to do this. And again, a marginal amount of that battery enrolled would be agreed upon and fixed. It would be up to a customer to change that if they ever were to exceed it, or maybe even lessen it down to, say, 10%. Of course, the customers may choose to unenroll at any time. I think that's it, Willie. So thanks, Asa, at this point, but a good bridge between the conversation we're having and ultimately the conversation we plan to have towards the end.
Thank you, Jeff. I guess maybe the right place to go from there is to ask the aggregators and also other stakeholders who are present here for your thoughts and feedback on what Luma is thinking about here in terms of what it's like. You're obviously one step closer to the participating customers. And your sense of the potential and your sense of what that looks like from a customer engagement and the long-term success and engagement with the program in terms of how do you think a particular effort focused around this summer relates to longer term, relates to customer welcoming, participating in something like this in future years, et cetera. So anyway, just various questions I have, but I want to hear from folks who are that one step closer to customers. Your thoughts and responses to what Luma is putting forth as a potential push for this summer. PJ first.
Yeah, I could just a few reactions there. Thank you for this, Jeff. I think it's a humanitarian thing when we're looking at going into this summer. I know that there's extreme urgency of figuring out all the different possible solutions, but I think it's an altruistic thing that's going on here, and I want to commend everybody involved. The important work that everyone's doing in their respective roles. Just a couple comments on what you said, Jeff. The auto enroll I think is brilliant. If it can work out with any remaining wrinkles to be ironed out, I think it can be a great resource, and we should all move quickly to get it approved. Once it's approved, though, it probably won't be actually overnight. I think there'll be some amount of rolling out where the aggregators would want to test with certain segments of their group, but it can be very, very quickly. Probably not actually overnight, but probably within a matter of a couple of weeks, you could get to numbers like that. And I think it'll be very successful. But frankly, my only real concern is I would hope that any Energy Bureau order doesn't make it required that it's only temporary. Like I think you are going to end up with a 180 megawatt resource you can use that's going to be as firm as any other resource on the grid. So I would hate to see that suddenly prematurely go away, like on October 31st, if that's the pilot period, because you might need it on New Year's Eve. You never know, So I just want to I want to cheer loudly for the success of this, but also remind us that we might need it later too. It might not necessarily be only a short-term thing. And lastly, Jeff, I don't think we're quite there yet, but pretty soon we're going to need to know exactly what you need from the Bureau. I think what you're going to need is just a slight tweak to their standing order for the program design, which I think currently says that customers must sign up one by one. I think you would need just something very simple that says, well, if a third-party aggregator owns the systems, then between the aggregator and the customers, auto-enroll is fine. I think it's really simple what you would actually need, but at some point soon, I think you need to put down on paper what exactly you want them to do. My initial reactions anyway, thank you.
Taurus.
Do we have aggregators for the entire 2,000 megawatt capacity of the batteries? Of those 7 aggregators, does that cover the 2,000 megawatt battery?
I just want to make sure we're clear on the number there. There's not actually there's 2,000 megawatt hours of battery, but the total battery capacity is what is like 600 megawatts or 650 megawatts total.
I can't hear you, Jeff.
1 hours. Apologies.
Oh, okay. Well, the same question. Do we have aggregators for the entire 600 megawatts or 2,000 megawatt hours?
Aggregators for the entire basis of that?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I can answer that completely. I would venture to say the answer is probably no. I think there are some number of customers that are unserved batteries from the ability to dispatch either on the part of the aggregator and their systems in terms of what they support from the technical API calls that they make to those batteries to set the parameters for dispatch. I don't know what the specific percentage of served batteries are in that against that total denominator, but it is not all of them. And as I said earlier, Commissioner, I think the other thing to remember here is that there's a derating of that ultimately in terms of some of the levers that we leave open for customers. So it is, while that is sort of the biggest number to look at in terms of the size of the pie, I think the more accurate figure that we've arrived at is somewhere in that sort of 100 to 120 to 180 megawatt hours that we think we can bring online, given both what we've seen in the pilot in terms of customers' willingness to participate and set the reserve settings, as well as sort of initial counts by some of the aggregators in terms of the third-party agreements and things that they have that would be permissible to pursue an auto-enroll strategy with. So it is certainly a proportional amount of that. It is not nearly all of that.
Okay.
Can I ask? I just want to get clarity on megawatts versus megawatt hours. So the current 10,000 enrollees have a peak capacity resource of about 20 megawatts, and as dispatched, seem to be able to run, say, 2-hour events at roughly that level of capacity. So there's about 40 megawatt hours of battery that is drawn, or like where are we on a megawatt hour basis in terms of the, to 10,000 customers is worth 20 megawatts. Like how many megawatt hours is that? And then I want clarity on when we're talking the auto enroll, are we talking megawatts or megawatt hours in terms of like what multiple are we working with here?
I'm going to lean into our administrator, who's working a lot more closely with the daily data than I am. I don't know if Chris or George can weigh in here, come off mute, and give some more specifics to us.
Yeah, this is Chris Ramey, Resource Innovations. Yeah, so your numbers were generally on track there. So what we're seeing is roughly double the megawatt hours from the megawatt value. The amount we're seeing from the megawatt hour the amount we're seeing from megawatts depends on the length of the event. Right? The longer the event, the less the megawatt. But the megawatt hours at the end of the day is similar. So, there's a total amount in the gas tank, just how much how quickly you get there depends on how long the event is.
I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of, a 5.5 hour average shortfall event from the analysis for the summer, right? If you had 20 megawatts flat for all of those 5 hours, that's 110 megawatt hours. Like that, maybe that's about the size of the aggregate, the size of the resource we're talking about. Or I want to get some sense of if we went to auto enroll, there's a bunch of participants, but you only get 20% of each of their batteries. So you got, the total number of megawatt hours is smaller there. So yeah, we're trying to get a handle on that. I guess Chip's hand was up next, but you feel free to take us. If you have answers to my questions, great. Otherwise, we'll put those on the bike rack for a moment and come back to them.
Yeah. I think you're asking fantastic questions, and I would love to dive into the weeds with this group here. I also want to respond to kind of the overarching question and just say, that Sunrun, once again supports the Loomis proposal here for auto enrollment. We've seen this model be successful before, and frankly, in Loomis proposal, we are giving customers complete power. Still, they will retain the right to opt out at any time. Right. And so we're just increasing the pool size, and some customers will stay in that pool and some customers will opt out. And so I think it is a great, starting place, considering, the magnitude of what we're forecasting on the island this summer. So starting there, but I think basically I have a couple other considerations. Essentially, we're asking customers to stay enrolled in this program and share their battery capacity for the sake of being what I'm going to call good grid citizens, which is kind of what PJ referred to earlier, but good neighbors, right? And because in doing that, they're actually increasing the likelihood of being impacted by an outage themselves, right? They are exposing themselves to additional risk. And I think that risk premium needs to be compensated in order to keep customers enrolled in this program and really see auto enrollment be as successful as it could. I think there are a number of ways that we can look at how do you compensate this risk. I guess I'll just highlight briefly that in the recent PREB order on making CBEST program permanent, right, PREB found that the economic benefit of avoiding load shed is likely to be on the order of twice as large as the cost of the current incentives, if not more. I would also point to FERC Order 831, which I understand Puerto Rico is not jurisdictional, governed by FERC, but that caps the energy price bids in markets. I think there is, value there in looking at what the emergency max bid is in other markets. And then the other last thing I would note, and then I'll turn it over, right, is that California has a similar emergency program called ELRP, Emergency Load Response Program, and that pays $2 per kilowatt hour. And again, I'm just saying here that we support auto enrollment, but I think there is additional risk that customers are being exposed to here. And I would just like to bring about the idea that if this were a market, right, that would be considered a risk premium, and that would have to be compensated by the market as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Torres, you had your hand up before. I just want to make sure that you didn't want to get in there.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
PJ, you still have your hand up, I think.
Yeah, sorry. A different topic than what you were just talking about, Chip, but thank you for all that as well. I was just going back to the question about the megawatts. I don't want to get lost in the numbers, but I think it's good to clarify conceptually. Jeff, I think when you're talking about megawatts available, when you imagine 50,000, let's say we can overnight get 50,000 signed up, just oversimplifying a little bit, if you assume everyone has 5 kilowatts available of their battery, that's 5 kilowatts times 50,000. That's a 250 megawatt nameplate capacity available to you as the utility. So when your number of 120 to 180 megawatts is more like realistically what you would expect to occur, given that 20 or 25% of customers are going to opt out of each one and any other sort of inefficiencies. So is that the right ballpark number? If you had 50,000 enrollees, you'd have a 250 megawatt nameplate aggregate resource, but you would expect that you would end up with around 120 to 180 megawatts of real power when you do an event, right?
Yeah, correct. Ballpark.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
We could double check all the math on this, but if you're only using 20% of each of those people's batteries, and it's like a 3-hour battery, you're getting about 0.6 hours per megawatt, right? So 150 megawatts might only be 100 megawatt hours. So
what was it? I'm sorry.
Maybe it's probably the guidance for expert witnesses is never do math on the stand, right? I think it'd be important for the Bureau considering this to really understand the size of the resource and how, what the impact is over the course of an event, right? If it's if the shortfall is 20 megawatts over 5 hours, right? like what does that look like, and what's the, you know, yes, there's some value in your dispatching resource. All it does is turn a 5.5-hour event into a 4-hour event, right? Like that's still progress, right? That's still a lot less disruptive. At fully avoiding events obviously is the best, right? But just I think in order to really think this through, I think we want to have a pretty good sense of what the concrete, actual, you know, real world implications of having a resource like this would be. That would help really understand the value of it, to Chip's point, and as well as just understanding what does this look like from a customer standpoint. I understand, Jeff, by only using 20% of the battery, you're trying to reduce the risk that Chip was talking about in terms of folks are still have 80% of their battery in case the load does shed, right? So yeah, try to think through all the aspects of this, but yeah, Jeff, you're good to go.
So what I'll do is we'll commit to providing a more precise forecast in follow-up to this. I mean, there are so many hypothetical ways to look at it. If we're talking 5.5 hours, we're talking 2.5 hours, if we're talking 20% or 10%, or what happens with our customers in terms of the ones that ultimately choose to say, you know what, this is great for me, take 40, right? So we'll provide that, I think, Asa, in a fast follow-up. It's not numbers that we have ready in the slides today. It also is largely determined by sort of the available participants as informed to us by the aggregators, which, you know, again, we've been taking very much a ballpark look at this thus far. So I think that's probably the best course of action, to be able to provide that in a more concise and sort of evidence-based way to you all in terms of what it is we forecast there. Otherwise today, as you said, it's just up here kind of spitballing around a number of different variables that may come into play. Largely though, you know, what that is, I think, is a part of the evaluation. I think maybe the more critical piece is, do we all think that we ultimately need more customers this summer? And do we think that it's an achievable approach to go through, say, the auto enrollment strategy as opposed to the current opt-in strategy? But happy, of course, to provide the physical numbers to back that up as well.
I'm sorry. There you are. I'm sorry. I said we didn't have audio for you. Were you trying to get me to talk? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. You had your hand up, so I was trying to call on you.
Forgive me, Kevin Joyce from Tesla. Yeah, the figuring out the numbers thing, I think, deserves a follow up. I wanted just to provide a perspective on the overall proposal. I think it's actually a very exciting overall proposal. This summer is going to be certainly a challenging one on a lot of fronts. This CBEST program is a very useful resource to try to address it. But it does take us back to earlier in the conversation when we were talking about customer outcomes and the unique challenges that we're facing in Puerto Rico in terms of, on a customer by customer basis, balancing the competing needs of knowing that there will be manual load shed and trying to mobilize the battery capacity for the benefit of the overall community. And I think this proposal does a good job of threading the needle in terms of providing some powerful tools to address some of the growth challenges that we've seen on the awareness side of things, while also being sensitive to the additional risks that Chris was talking about. Chip was talking about, by changing the expectation to do the auto enrollment, but to have everyone participate at a much lower level, to respect the fact that by default, to respect the fact that additional load shed and additional outages are likely and in fact expected. So it's a really interesting solution. I think what is enabling about it is the flexibility and choice kind of at every piece of this, allowing aggregators to avail themselves of this in order to help grow the resource, and also allowing customers to react to the program and to make all the selections and even not participate if they like. This is all the choice component of it is super important given the complexities and the risks involved. But we too have seen this auto enroll model succeed in other markets, and I think that this proposal is well thought out in terms of the unique risks of Puerto Rico.
Thanks. Mr. Cosme, your hand up.
Yes, I have a question for Luma. In this case, if they had addressed or considered the situation of high voltage that may be present at some distribution lines, that those systems are connected for an event at nighttime, as happens as it's happening in the daytime with the normal situation of solar generation.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Cosme. It's not my personal area of expertise, but obviously aware of the situational dynamics that we face on the grid. And I think one that we do share concern of, if you recall, I made mention of sort of the collaborative effort that Luma is undergoing with the national labs in looking at the system level impacts, distribution system level impacts of the VPP. It's not something that is complete yet. It's something that we hope to have completed, in the next 2 or 3 months. But we're actively working through our distribution planning team, as well as with the national labs, to look at some of those factors that we're considering. I think given the scenario, there are sort of 2 levers that give us at least marginal amount of comfort. One is that all of these customers are NEM customers today. And so they've gone through an initial evaluation of their system, including that storage system. That gives us some confidence in how they are interconnected and operating with the grid today. That's not to speak to the larger issue that you bring up in terms of system issues, etc. There is inherently always some risk, but I think that's sort of a part of the playing pieces that we have to sort of consider in the weight of the decision to grow this program and dispatch this amount of energy from sort of an outside-in perspective, if you will, moving forward. If we didn't have the generation situation that we have this summer, I think this would be a slightly different conversation that we're having today, and it perhaps be a little bit more measured in terms of the approach of growth that we'd be taking. However, given the circumstances and the availability of this resource, say, versus any other generation resource, it's a risk that ultimately I think we've discussed with our distribution planning team. I know Daniel Houghton will be on at some point in the conversation today, so perhaps we can revisit this. But ultimately, it's one that they're comfortable with today.
Well, also that's in the technical aspect, but also you have to consider then the contingency that may face a customer that he elected or opt to participate in an event, and he cannot do it because limitation of the distribution line. So it's something that has to be considered too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one more just factual question to try to get straight on, we look for follow-up filings and such. But I think I understood that the idea would be that the only customers who would be auto-enrolled are those where there's a third-party ownership model, where the system is actually, the assets belong to one of the aggregators. Is that right? And do we know roughly that that's a derating kind of question of like, okay, if there's 2,000 megawatt hours of battery out there, like what fraction of them are actually third-party owned, so as to be sort of potentially in this universe? But I guess, can you confirm that understanding?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We will. That is the understanding. I don't want to limit it to third party owned, and maybe one of the aggregators, Michael, about to speak here, can kind of confirm his specific perspective on sort of what those eligible setups are for this type of auto enrollment. But to your second question, Asa, I think that that is one of those sort of derating factors from the total, available capacity is how many of those are out there. I don't have the figure today. We will make sure that we work that into ultimately the figures we present in follow up to the Bureau and constituents. I don't know, Michael, if you or Chip or Kevin want to speak a little bit more about the specific instruments and mechanisms that you have that would enable that. Certainly third party owned is sort of the one that comes to mind for me as well, but I know we had some conversation that there may be some other eligible approaches that fit the bill.
So thank you, Jeff, and again the commissioners and Engineer Cosme. From Sunova's perspective, we have the ability to auto enroll based on existing language in the lease contracts and the loan contracts if there is a remaining balance left for payment on the loan. Now, for the lease contracts, Sunova has to do some internal due diligence with tax equity partners that might have a participation in the asset ownership of those systems. And that's something that Zach and I, Jeff, we can work with you and share those numbers privately. On a second point, and I think it's important, this comes up because this program has been in the press recently and is ramping up, is we have been given permission by DOE to enroll some of the low-income customers that are being deployed under the Solar Access or the Puerto Rico Resiliency Fund, as you might have heard. But in that agreement with DOE, customers that have a medical device dependent designation under the DOE program will not be enrolled in the VPP. So what I want to say with that is you might see a lot of big numbers in terms of customers and batteries, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Sunova has an unlimited systems to tap, right? That's something that we can discuss, Jeff, the numbers from Sunova's side privately.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Go ahead.
Jeff, it's Chip Silverman from Sunrun. I'm happy to just add Sunrun's perspective here to your question. The majority of our systems are third-party owned through various financial structures that we talked about earlier. In the existing terms and conditions, we already have the appropriate rights to enroll these systems, to automatically enroll them, as we discussed. We don't have a problem there. I do think we would be able to get a significant increase in the number of customers who are participating, very significant, with this auto enrollment structure. In our other markets, I'll just cite California again. We see about 90 to 95% of total customers choosing to remain in the VPP. That is to say, we only see about 5 to 10% of customers opting out of the VPP when we have an auto enrollment structure. If you compare that to Puerto Rico, I would say in general, in a ballpark, we see about 10% of customers or less opting in to the VPP. So in effect, what auto enrollment would allow is for us to kind of flip the current paradigm on its head, to go from 10% participation rate to 90% participation rate. And even with 20% of each battery's capacity or less, whether it's a 2-hour event or a 5-hour event, Asa, I think your line of questions here are spot on, and I'm not trying to overlook that. I do think we need to deep dive there and double click. Regardless of the event length, we will have a sizable resource for Puerto Rico to deploy this summer to help to mitigate against some of the risks of and challenges that are being presented to the island.
I just want to maybe take a moment on process before we go back to the other sort of general, more mundane, I suppose, questions about the battery program. The Bureau's order for setting up this technical conference had set a deadline for follow-up comments on this workshop, on the technical conference for June 5th. My sense is that the timeline, if we're thinking about something for this summer, should be faster than that. So I guess if we could have an expectation that that Luma will file whatever follow-up, what specific ask do you have of the Bureau, as well as the specific analysis supporting that, et cetera, in the relatively near term. And I'll give you a chance in a moment to say what you think relatively near term could mean. And then ask others, particularly aggregators, but also other stakeholders, ICPO, et cetera, to think about responding to that relatively quickly, right? So that we can just get all of the necessary information onto the table quickly, so that the Bureau has a chance to act in time to, turn the various cranks, right? Get stuff moving, few weeks to ramp up, et cetera. It's 10 weeks until July 1st, right? So, we want to give some sense of what that, time to get the wheels all turned in time for it to get to be summer, right? So I guess, Jeff, first, how quickly do you think Luma could make a more specific, concrete filing that the Bureau could review and that others could respond to?
Yeah, given the need to engage with our aggregator partners, firm some things up, obviously, here, I would say that within the next 2 weeks, we can get something in front of the Bureau that will contain all the things that you talked about, Asa. So that will be our target goal. Obviously, as soon as possible is always the name of the game, but I think if we're going to be realistic about all the ongoing parts and pieces, the next 2 weeks would be a realistic time frame for us to submit something for formal prep review and approval.
I would say something, 2 weeks from today is the 8th of May. Can we aim for that? And then if others could plan to have reply comments or whatever response to that as soon as possible after that, but no later than say 2 weeks after that, right? That puts us in May 22 to have a full picture. Tell me about whether, do we need 2 weeks to respond to Luma's filing? I mean, Luma doesn't need 2 weeks, but others may. Right? How you feel about, maybe the Monday of that week, right, rather than the Thursday, right, just to give everybody a little more time. It's a question of the Bureau time to review and respond versus you time to review and respond. So I guess thoughts from any of the other folks here, the Consumer Protection Office or aggregators or others, on how long after you see Luma's filing do you want before you would file your thoughts on it, so the Bureau has a full picture. Mr. Cosme, I saw you came off mute.
Yes, when Luma say that they could do the submission?
They said they were 2 weeks from today, May 8th. And so the question of how soon after that.
Okay. So I guess maybe a little bit more than a week.
Sure. So yeah, just for so we make sure everybody's on the same page, and if anybody isn't watching this live, et cetera, we'll work with the Bureau to get a short scheduling order type thing out. Some memorializing dates, but if you all could plan for May 8th for Luma, and then looking at a calendar here, Monday the 19th of May, 11 days later, a little more than a week, to do reply, or comments on Luma's filing. We'll work with that. If anybody needs to follow up immediately after to say, well, no, can we please have the 20th or whatever? Let me know. But Commissioner Ramos, I see you coming off there too.
Yes. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon already. Couple things. Mr. Wall referred to this CBEST Plus program as something or having a temporary aspect to it. My question is, once we have the people enrolled, what the question would be, what would be the temporary aspect to this summer part, or the 2025 summer issue that we have? So why are you calling it temporary?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you, Commissioner Ramos. I think there are two reasons, Luma's referencing this as temporary. The problem, or the size of the problem, is sort of limited to the peak period in which our demand is more than sort of the generation available. Now, that problem may persist. I think PJ pointed that out, although I don't think the New Year's Eve reference is an actual one. That was not a generation sort of fall event on New Year's Eve. So there is the potential for it to be longer than temporary, but I think we're looking at it temporary because that's the period in which we have the resource adequacy forecast right now. It may be something we want to revisit on a quarterly basis to say, do we need to extend this? The other reason, Commissioner Ramos, that we're looking at temporary is because of some of the program design parameters of CBEST that ultimately would impact some of the cost associated with the continuance of more customers enrolled in the program. PJ and other aggregators points aside, right, in terms of, this is a valuable resource that you've got ready to go. Some of the current program design elements of CBEST are a 50 event minimum. Now, where we're sitting today, that's not an unachievable metric in terms of the likelihood of we need to call 50 times. But where we're at, say, in a year or 2 years, that may become essentially disadvantageous to have to call it as many times if, say, we're in a position where we have better total capacity on the grid. We've fixed the baseload generators, ASAP batteries are there. Again, that's sort of a weight of sort of that program design element against the total number of enrolled customers and the expected number of dispatch events. And so really it's for Luma as the operator, it's really thinking along the lines of the cost associated with keeping that number of customers involved and active in the program, as opposed to sort of the 19,500 that we think is going to satisfy or has historically satisfied the vast majority of events. Again, you could go either way on that, but there's a cost consideration in terms of not having it temporary and having them stay in the program. I think you had one more question, Commissioner Ramos, but I'll.
Yeah, well, so essentially we would have a temporary aspect to it, so we won't have a cost associated with having more people than we need at any given point, but the people are still going to be part of the program, right? I mean, or are you implying or
that's
suggesting that they would have a temporary agreement with their aggregator? Is that what he's suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting, and it certainly is worth additional conversation. The idea here is that the temporary status beyond, so say customer number 19,501 to say customer 60,000, right? That's this expansionary group beyond what we had planned for CBEST. When we got to say November 1st, what happens to those customers? There would need to be some sort of process to essentially let them know that they're no longer going to be dispatched, right? At that point in time, as the program came to its temporary end closure, we would only dispatch to the CBEST enrolled customers in the 19,500. Now, again, there are trade-offs in that from a customer experience standpoint as well, but I think certainly the idea here is your point is not having too many customers along with the too many events that may or may not be required to satisfy, what is normally a regular operating system need. In the months of November, December, January, February, we could get back to next summer and be back in the same position. And as BJ said, it would be really valuable to have them there. But again, there's a carrying cost to those customers in those off months.
Yeah, I just don't see the incremental cost of having the 19,501 customer and the rest. I just don't see how that could be a significant cost of just having them stand by. I would love to see your arguments on that in your filing.
Yeah. I can provide more. I think maybe to use simple figures now, right? If we estimate the budget for the 19,500 at 75 events for this upcoming fiscal year at $5 million approximately. Ultimately, if you're going to triple the size of that to 60,000, then you're going to have to triple the size of that budget, right? So 15 million or 16 million or 20 million, depending on the levers that get that.
But we're talking about having the available capacity, not guaranteeing them an event.
There's a number of events as a part of the current program design, which is 50 events minimum.
Yeah, so I think the question would be whether the extent, how much that event minimum, what role that plays for the auto-enrolled customers. One of the points of having that minimum was to say, like, it's worth it to you to voluntarily enroll, right? This is going to get called enough that it's going to be a valuable enough thing for you to be worth it. If you're auto-enrolled, that, like, is it worth it question, like, the question, like, okay, is it worth staying in the program? But, like, it's a different level hurdle to ask customers to get over. And so the role of a dispatch minimum in the program design is different in an auto-enroll context than it is in an opt-in, I need to actively sign up type context from a customer standpoint. Mr. Cosme.
Yes, came to my mind this question that in analogy with the load shed that Luma chief the amount of people that are load shed in this insufficient power energy events, you do the same, or you're planning to do the same with these customers that have CBES, so they are rotating, or you are using always the same customer?
If I understand your question correctly, we use the same customers in every event. So our current dispatch procedure leverages the entire fleet of customer enrolled batteries, and we dispatch today, and we get somewhere on the order of the 10 or 20 megawatts, depending on sort of the aggregators give us for that particular date and time. So they're dispatched every time. I think that would persist into the summer because the size of the problem is greater, and even what we've talked about in terms of auto enrollment, we won't satisfy every single constraint we're going to face this summer. So yeah, they will be dispatched every time. Now they remain with the option each time to say, not for me, not this time. And that's obviously what moves our numbers slightly up and down each time. For you, not on Tuesdays, for me, not on Wednesdays, or eventually I may, I'm going to change my reserve level. So there is that variability in it. But yeah, we dispatch the entire fleet each time.
Okay, let's say that you have 60,000 customers then. What would happen?
We will probably still dispatch the entire fleet because from the grid operator's perspective, when things are not as great as they are this summer, generally call on this resource when we have 100 megawatts or less of peak operating reserve capacity. Most jurisdictions in North America, they call manual load shed when they get to sort of 15% of their peak capacity. So when they're not near 0 or 100, when they're at 400 or 700 megawatts. And so in likelihood, if we were to say get 120, just pulling a number out here, we would probably call on it because what it represents is an insurance policy for the operator that something else doesn't go wrong, right? So this idea of trying to call a precise amount, say 32,300 customers, because that's going to solve the problem, is not really the right approach. Rather, what you're doing is you're calling on all of them, and if you get a bit more buffer, it's certainly worth it in case any other sort of events were to occur that might also eat into sort of the capacity you provide. So it's unlikely that we would chop it up. There may be some scenarios where, depending on the particular dispatch curve that the operator wants, he may say, well, let's stagger them, right? That's a big part of the ramping that we're talking about. If we're bringing on that much capacity, So they may not all get turned on at the same time, but they'll certainly all probably be called upon.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, Joyce, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Kevin Joyce from Tesla. To go back to real quick the conversation about the potential carrying cost of the additional participants to have them available when they're next needed or next summer. I think this is a useful thing to think through. Obviously, the customer experience of not knowing if you're in and out is something to be avoided. One of the things that I wanted to add to the conversation, of course, is that part of this auto enrollment approach is also to reduce the expectation from any given participant. The number that's being thrown around here is to auto enroll the customer, but to default them to only participating with 20% of their battery or some other low value that we determine to be appropriate. That's significantly lower than the assumption than the current state, and my understanding currently lower than the assumption that goes into the budgeting. So there's a possibility, and we'll know more when we get experience, if we get experience with proceeding with this. But it may be that this additional customers participating at a lower rate has a mitigating effect on the overall program budget.
Yeah, that's. Thank you, Kevin.
I think having some input from particularly in aggregators, if you're thinking in your reply comments about what this overall thing looks like from a customer standpoint, any concerns you might have about customers having a positive experience with this. I think we would very much want to avoid a potential downside where customers get auto enrolled, have a mediocre or worse experience in summer 2025, and it actually hurts the ability of this kind of resource to exist in the longer term. So making sure that we have a positive experience with this change if it were to be adopted, and thinking through that piece of it would also be an important thing that we'd like to hear from folks about. Any other questions or comments on this summer auto enrollment question? My proposal is that we would, I think, this great addition to the agenda, but did throw the schedule on the agenda off by a little bit. We do have some additional follow-up on various other questions, issues on the CB's portion before we switch to the other DR and resources and EE plans and all the rest of the things we tended to cover today. But given that we are an hour and 10 minutes later than what one might have guessed would have been lunchtime based on the agenda, I'm going to suggest that we take a lunch break now and come back to the remainder of the battery energy sharing discussion and then move on the rest of the way through the agenda. I'm going to suggest that we come back at 1:30, so 50 minutes from now, and then we'll proceed from there. Does anybody have any last comments or questions before we break for that lunch break? All right, sounds good. So we will be back at in 49 minutes. 1:30 and pick up with the remainder of the battery energy sharing portion of the agenda and on to the other DR and EE stuff to follow. Great. Thanks all.